Silver's Rayleigh, Luffy's mentor during the time skip, was a formidable man back in his prime and continues to be so. He helped Luffy reach new heights during the 2 years he spent with him. But what if Rayleigh trained Luffy from the start? On a bright day over Dawn Island, young Luffy, Ace, and Sabo roamed the forest, dreaming of adventure. They couldn't have imagined that a fateful encounter was happening nearby. Silver's Rayleigh, the Dark King and former right-hand man of Goldie Roger, strolled through the bustling town of Fuchsia Village. He carried the presence of a drunkard, and no one would have guessed how strong he really was. He had come to the island on a whim, seeking a quiet moment to reflect and possibly catch up with one of his former rivals who he'd heard was there. Right on cue, Vice Admiral Monkey D. Garp caught notice of him and loudly called out. He grinned widely as he approached his old sparring partner. The two men clasped hands in a grip that conveyed both mutual respect and a hint of rivalry. The two warriors shared stories of old battles like cannon fire. Inevitably, the conversation turned to Garp's family. The Vice Admiral, ever the doting grandfather, began speaking of his grandson Luffy with pride and exasperation. He complained that Luffy had his head filled with nonsense about becoming a pirate due to Shanks, and it was driving him mad since Garp wanted him to be a marine. Rayleigh listened with interest and wanted to see the boy. The two spent some time catching up, but Rayleigh's curiosity was piqued. That evening, he quietly observed the trio from a distance. The sight brought a pang of nostalgia as his sharp eyes caught the fiery determination in Ace's stance. A spitting image of his late captain, Goldie Roger. Rayleigh quickly pushed that thought aside, distracted by Luffy. Over the next few days, Rayleigh began interacting with the trio. It started casually. He'd offer tips when he saw them sparring or share a tale or two from the high seas without giving away the details of his more infamous exploits. Luffy was captivated, soaking up every word, while Ace and Sabo treated Rayleigh with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. One afternoon, as Luffy practiced throwing punches against a tree, Rayleigh approached him and guided him to loosen his stance and focus on his balance. Luffy immediately did as instructed and began mimicking the old man, who smiled into weeks, and Rayleigh's interest in Luffy only grew. The boy's enthusiasm was boundless, and he clearly had raw potential. One evening, Rayleigh sought out Garp at the edge of the forest and told him directly that he wanted to train Luffy. Garp's frustration was evident as he confronted Rayleigh, firmly opposing the idea of Luffy becoming a pirate. Rayleigh, however, remained steadfast, pointing out that while Shanks had sparked Luffy's interest, the boy's determination was entirely his own. Curly Dedan's piercing voice broke the tension between them as their heated exchange threatened to turn into a full-on brawl. With her hands on her hips, she strode onto the scene and scolded both men for their actions, blaming Rayleigh for his inexperience with raising a child like Luffy and Garp for his frequent absences. Her no-nonsense manner momentarily shook the two legends, causing them to stand motionless. With a sigh, Dedan admitted that Rayleigh had a point. If Garp couldn't be present to guide Luffy, perhaps it was time for someone else to step in. Garp, though clearly displeased, eventually conceded with a begrudging sigh, warning Rayleigh not to come back complaining if Luffy turned out to be even more troublesome than Shanks. Rayleigh accepted the decision with a bittersweet smile, promising to take good care of the boy. The next morning, Luffy said his goodbyes to Ace and Sabo, promising to return stronger than ever. With a grin, he followed Rayleigh to the shore, his heart pounding with excitement. Rayleigh's decision to train Luffy was not made lightly, but as the boy's mentor, he knew he had chosen a diamond in the rough. When they arrived at Sabaody Archipelago, Luffy's eyes sparkled with wonder, but Rayleigh wasted no time in whipping the boy into shape. Rayleigh initially attempted to teach Luffy the basics of swordsmanship. He handed the boy a lightweight practice sword and demonstrated simple movements, but no matter how much Luffy tried, his strikes were wild, erratic, and lacked precision. Luffy mostly spent his time practicing with his fists. One day, in frustration, Luffy tossed the practice sword aside during a sparring session, grabbed a random wooden stick lying nearby, and swung it. Rayleigh had an idea. He got Luffy a staff and realized the boy might have potential with it. Though the movements were crude, there was a natural flow to them. From that day forward, Luffy trained with the staff, using it to block, strike, and even incorporate it into his unpredictable, acrobatic fighting style. Over time, he infused his growing mastery of haki into the weapon, giving his strikes devastating force along with the power he put behind his fists. Luffy's haki training was grueling. Rayleigh pushed him relentlessly, teaching him the two types of haki, observation and armament. Rayleigh blindfolded Luffy and made him dodge attacks while listening to the presence of the world around him. Luffy struggled at first, often getting smacked by Rayleigh's practice sword, but his instincts sharpened with time. Soon, he could sense even the smallest changes in his surroundings, avoiding attacks with uncanny precision. To strengthen Luffy's strikes, Rayleigh taught him to harden his body and weapon with armament haki. Luffy practiced for hours, trying to break rocks with his staff, his fists, or even his head. Eventually, Luffy learned to coat his body and his staff in shimmering black haki, making it an extension of his will. After a few years, a new power suddenly arose inside our hero. The first time Luffy used it, he accidentally knocked out a flock of birds while trying to call them closer for lunch. Luffy had used Conqueror's haki! This power came naturally to Luffy, though Rayleigh taught him how to control and channel it. The old man laughed until tears streamed down his face when he realized what happened to the birds, knowing the boy's potential was extraordinary. Every few months, Rayleigh brought Luffy along to Amazon Lily, where he often checked on Boa Hancock. A warlord of the sea, Boa initially regarded Luffy with disdain, seeing him as just another bratty male kid. But Rayleigh had saved the Gorgon sisters, and Boa tolerated their savior's disciple. Luffy's curiosity about the island's culture, its warriors, and its unique flora quickly won over the Kuja warriors, who found his energy and fearlessness endearing. One day, during an argument, Boa decided to test Luffy and turned her powers on him. When Boa Hancock unleashed her love beam with a confident declaration, she fully expected Luffy to succumb like every other soul who had dared to stand before her. But to her shock, the beam had no effect. Luffy, utterly unfazed, simply blinked in confusion, scratching his head and asking why she was making strange faces. The entire island was left in stunned silence, their empress's unparalleled beauty rendered powerless against the carefree young man. At first, Boa's frustration was palpable. How could someone resist her, let alone remain completely oblivious? Yet, as she continued to observe Luffy, her anger began to soften. His unshakable resolve, genuine kindness, and infectious goofiness slowly broke down her defenses. Over time, her irritation gave way to intrigue and eventually admiration. One day, after a particularly grueling training session, Boa admitted with a faint blush that Luffy was unlike anyone she had ever met. As always, Luffy remained blissfully unaware of the weight of her words, responding with his signature grin and an innocent compliment about how nice she was. When Luffy turned 15, Rayleigh brought him to Rusakena, an island filled with ferocious wildlife and harsh conditions. He proceeded to train him for the next 2 years. The island tested every skill Luffy had learned. He honed his haki to near perfection, learning to fight against creatures much larger and stronger than himself. The staff became an extension of his body, and his observation haki became so sharp that he could anticipate the movements of predators long before they attacked. During their evenings by the campfire, Rayleigh shared tales of Gold D. Roger and the legendary crew. Luffy listened wide-eyed as Rayleigh described adventures across the Grand Line, their clashes with powerful foes, and the unbreakable camaraderie of the Pirate King's crew. Rayleigh told Luffy that Roger inspired both loyalty and fear in equal measure, and he saw the same thing when he looked at Luffy. By the end of his training, Luffy had become a formidable warrior, his haki rivaling even seasoned veterans. At 17, he stood at the edge of Rusakena's shore with a plethora of huge animals at his mercy. Armed with mastery of haki, a unique fighting style involving his staff and an indomitable spirit, he set out to achieve his dream of becoming Pirate King. Inspired by Rayleigh's stories of Gold D. Roger and his legendary crew, Luffy resolved to meet as many of Roger's old allies and rivals as possible, hoping to learn from them and gather a crew of powerful, like-minded individuals. And the first person that came to his mind was none other than the warlord of the sea, Boa! Upon reaching Amazon Lily, Luffy reunited with Boa Hancock. Though she was the island's empress and a warlord of the sea, Luffy's request for her to join his crew surprised her. She was basically gushing at the time, but she couldn't leave her duties behind. She was devoted to protecting her island and her people. But Luffy's unwavering spirit reminded her of her own desire to see the world beyond Amazon Lily. It wasn't until her sisters pushed her to go that Boa accepted Luffy's invitation and became his first crewmate. Luffy's journey to gather his crew brought him face to face with a diverse array of formidable individuals, each encounter adding to the unique dynamic of his growing team. On a desolate island torn apart by pirate skirmishes, Luffy met Trafalgar D. Waterlaw, the enigmatic surgeon of death. Initially wary, Law was drawn to Luffy's carefree demeanor and unyielding courage. After Luffy helped defend Law's crew from another raid, the doctor reluctantly agreed to join, intrigued by Luffy's strength and charisma, though he insisted it was on his own terms. In a chaotic port town, Luffy encountered the brash and powerful Eustace Kid, whose magnetic abilities wreaked havoc during a fierce brawl. Impressed by Kid's strength, Luffy challenged him to a duel, their clash of haki and powers ending with Luffy defeating Kid one-sidedly. Kid joined up for the sole reason of beating Luffy one day and getting to fight him any chance he got. High above on a sky island, Luffy found Urouge, the mad monk, meditating in a ruined temple. Drawn by rumors of the monk's giant-like strength, Luffy sought him out and challenged him to a friendly spar. Urouge was impressed by Luffy's haki and his relentless spirit, agreeing to join the crew to see how far Luffy's ambition could take them. In a bustling market town, Luffy stumbled upon Jewelry Bonnie, a cunning pirate using her devil fruit powers to evade capture while pickpocketing merchants. Despite her initial irritation at his meddling, Bonnie found herself entertained by Luffy's persistence. Seeing an opportunity to escape the Marines, she joined his crew with the condition that she retained her freedom, a stipulation Luffy happily accepted. With Boa Hancock, Trafalgar Law, Eustace Kid, Urouge, and Jewelry Bonnie by his side, Luffy's crew was unlike any other. Each member brought unique abilities, personalities, and different types of strengths. Together, they were ready to make their mark on the seas and chase their dreams of freedom, adventure, and treasure. Luffy's journey to uncover the legacy of Gold D. Roger led him to the Twin Capes, where he met Crocus, the former doctor of Roger's crew. Crocus, a grizzled yet warm-hearted man, shared stories of Roger's determination and camaraderie, inspiring Luffy even further. It was during this visit that Crocus delivered devastating news. Portgas D. Ace, Luffy's brother, was to be executed at Marineford. Luffy's blood ran cold as he heard this news, and with his crew at his side, he set sail at breakneck speed toward Marine headquarters, ready to take on the world if it meant saving Ace. As Luffy approached Marineford, the battlefield was already in chaos. The Whitebeard pirates were locked in a brutal clash against the Marines, with towering waves of ice and fire clashing against explosions and steel. Whitebeard stood as a titan, his quakes splitting the sea, but even he was starting to show signs of wear. Luffy, wielding his staff infused with armament haki, leaped into the fray with his crew. His arrival was met with astonishment from everyone. This young pirate, with no devil fruit powers, fought with the strength of an admiral. He quickly began breaking through Marine lines as his crew followed along and dealt with fodder. Kizaru was the one to act quickly as he intercepted Luffy with his light speed attacks. Luffy sensed his approach and quickly blocked the attack, displaying strength the admiral wasn't ready for. The battle was intense, but Luffy's observation haki allowed him to narrowly avoid Kizaru's beams, while his conqueror's haki knocked out weaker Marines in waves. Though Luffy couldn't land a decisive blow against the light man, his relentless attacks held back Kizaru enough for Marco the Phoenix to intervene, letting Luffy head to the execution platform. As Luffy neared the execution platform, Garp appeared in front of him. Garp, watching how strong Luffy had gotten in the time he was away, was surprised to no end, but his duties came in the way. Despite that, Garp allowed himself to be knocked aside because his heart simply couldn't allow him to stop his grandson. With Ace in front of him, Luffy broke his bindings and suddenly, the massive Sengoku was upon them. It was too late though. A massive room encompassed the brothers, and in an instant, Law's ability swapped Ace and Luffy out of harm's way. Whitebeard, seeing his son saved, unleashed his full power. His quakes shook Marineford to its core, devastating the Marine ranks. As the war reached its boiling point, the red-haired pirates arrived. Shanks walked through the chaos with an air of authority, his conqueror's haki silencing the battlefield. He clearly declared that this war must end, or he too would join it. The Emperor was successful in stopping the war. Ace survived, Whitebeard lived, and the world was shaken by the events of Marineford. Luffy's presence at the war made headlines, cementing his reputation as one of the most dangerous pirates with the strength to keep up with an admiral. With his crew and newfound allies, Luffy set his sights on the next stage of his journey, more determined than ever to find the One Piece and honor Roger's legacy. After the chaos of Marineford had settled and the pirates dispersed, Luffy found himself aboard the red-haired pirate's flagship with his crew, docked at a remote and peaceful island. Shanks, having witnessed the young pirate's growth firsthand, decided to have a drink with him. The two sat on the beach under a brilliant orange sunset as the three crews bantered and laughed during a feast. Luffy held his staff casually across his shoulders, while Shanks leaned against a large barrel, a bottle of rum in hand. Shanks looked at Luffy with warmth and nostalgia, noting how much the young pirate had grown. He couldn't help but draw parallels between Luffy and Roger, remarking on the same fire in his eyes and unshakable belief in his dreams. Luffy, eager and curious, leaned in, his eyes sparkling as he bombarded Shanks with questions about Roger. What he was like, how strong he was, and the nature of his legendary crew. Shanks began recounting tales of the Pirate King, describing Roger as more than just a fighter, but as someone who could inspire belief in the impossible. As the night deepened, Shanks reached into a locked chest he had carried aboard. From within, he pulled out a peculiar-looking fruit with swirling patterns, its reddish hue gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Shanks held the fruit in the air, a mischievous grin on his face and a drunken blush, and told Luffy that this was a special kind of fruit. Luffy became excited at the thought of special food and ended up taking a bite while Shanks was distracted, telling the story of how he got it. Shanks' jaw dropped to the floor when he saw what Luffy had done. Luffy froze mid-chew, his eyes wide, and exclaimed that the fruit was absolutely terrible. Shanks couldn't contain his laughter as he realized what had just happened. Luffy had unknowingly eaten the devil fruit. As understanding dawned on Luffy, his body began to twist and stretch in bizarre ways, his arms elongating uncontrollably as he flailed in confusion. Shanks, doubled over with laughter, declared him the Gum Gum Man, much to Luffy's dismay. For hours, Luffy stumbled around trying to control his newfound powers, launching himself into trees, tangling his limbs in the ship's mast, and almost losing his staff in the ocean. Boa was angered to no end, blaming Shanks for having given Luffy something that was clearly poison to him, and chased him around the island. She eventually gave up after pummeling Shanks, who couldn't stop laughing at the absurdity of it all. As Luffy stumbled around, Shanks, still amused, reassured him that the chaotic nature of the fruit suited him perfectly, likening its unpredictability to Luffy's own boundless spirit. As Luffy experimented with his abilities, he quickly began to integrate the powers into his fighting style, spinning his staff with elongated arms and propelling himself at incredible speed using his rubbery legs. Shanks watched proudly, noting Luffy's adaptability and imagining how Roger would have marveled at this sight. Later, as they shared a meal, Luffy admitted that while the fruit was strange, he was starting to find it fun. Shanks placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, telling Luffy that the fruit, like his haki, was a gift to help him achieve his dream. Then Shanks placed a straw hat on Luffy's head and told him that it belonged to the former Pirate King. He said that Luffy should keep it safe until they met again on the seas. Inspired, Luffy declared his resolve not only to carry on Roger's legacy, but to surpass it and become the Pirate King. Shanks, raising his bottle in a toast, laughed and promised to watch him every step of the way. With the chaos of Marineford behind him, Ace safe, and having acquired a new devil fruit, Luffy sailed to Sabaody Archipelago to reunite with his mentor. His crew accompanied him as they traveled to the island and eventually found Rayleigh seated cross-legged on the shore near his modest dwelling. He grinned as he spotted Luffy's familiar grin approaching. Rayleigh was glad to see him safe and noted the straw hat on his head. Nostalgia filled him as Luffy came rushing toward him. He eagerly announced his latest achievements, proclaiming that he had saved Ace and grown stronger than ever. Rayleigh chuckled, noting the sharpness of Luffy's haki, but was curious. Had saved Ace. Rayleigh chuckled. Luffy explained his next mission, finding a place called Zoo to meet Nekomamushi and Inuarashi, figures from Roger's era. Rayleigh's demeanor shifted to one of contemplation as he described Zoo's uniqueness, a settlement perched on the back of Zunesha, a colossal ancient elephant that had roamed the seas for over a millennium. He spoke of the Minks, a people unlike any others Luffy had encountered. Luffy's excitement only grew at the prospect of such an adventure, prompting him to demand directions. With a fond sigh and a shake of his head, Rayleigh agreed to chart a course for the ever-restless pirate, knowing full well that Luffy's journey was destined to be anything but ordinary. After Kid's week-long mastery of navigation, the crew finally approached the awe-inspiring sight of Zunesha. The gargantuan elephant trudged through the ocean, its colossal legs towering high above the waves, while its back supported an entire ecosystem veiled in mist. The sight left the crew speechless, except for Kid, who shouted his amazement despite himself, and Bonnie, who commented in awe mid-bite of her perpetual snack. Law, ever the calm strategist, explained that Zunesha was a living island, home to the Mink tribe, a secluded civilization entirely cut off from the outside world. Luffy, impatient as always, couldn't wait for further explanation. With his gum-gum powers, he launched himself up one of Zunesha's massive legs, landing in the dense, vibrant greenery above. The rest of the crew followed in their own ways, some climbing, others using their unique abilities. Upon reaching the summit, they were greeted by the Mink tribe, an assembly of fierce warriors brandishing spears and clad in tribal garb. Their wary stares held a mix of curiosity and suspicion. A lion-like warrior stepped forward, his booming voice demanding to know the strangers' identities. Luffy stepped forward without hesitation, flashing his trademark grin as he introduced himself and declared his intent to meet Nekomamushi and Inuarashi. Moments later, the towering, jovial figure of Nekomamushi, ruler of the Whale Forest, emerged, his golden eyes gleaming with interest. Shortly after, the dignified and somber Inuarashi joined him, their mutual animosity momentarily set aside to assess the newcomers. The Mink rulers expressed curiosity and a hint of recognition upon hearing Luffy's name. Nekomamushi, with a mischievous grin, acknowledged that Rayleigh had spoken of the young pirate. Inuarashi, more reserved, remarked on the striking resemblance between Luffy's boldness and the aura of Goldie Roger. Luffy, ever curious and eager, bombarded them with questions about Roger, the Mink's connection to him, and the state of Zoo. Luffy also learned about Kaido and his tyranny in Wano. When Luffy heard of the destruction and suffering Kaido had caused, his cheerful demeanor vanished. His hands clenched into fists, and his conqueror's haki flared unconsciously, causing some of the weaker Minks to stagger. Luffy declared that he could not watch helplessly as innocent people suffered under the Yonko's tyranny. His voice was firm and unwavering. Impressed by Luffy's audacity, Nekomamushi teased him about the difficulty of the task, but Luffy remained unfazed. He declared that no one, no matter how powerful, should be allowed to do such damage and escape punishment. Inspired by his determination, the Minks rallied around him, with many offering their support and pledging their aid if the fight came to them. Nekomamushi realized that Luffy was strong, but he told him and his crew that they needed to get stronger and that the Minks could help them with that. Luffy and his crew decided to remain on Zoo for a while to train and recuperate. The unique environment, along with the strength and abilities of the Mink tribe, made it the perfect place for them to sharpen their skills. Nekomamushi and Inuarashi agreed to train him and his crew. The Minks taught them about the harsh primal fighting styles honed secrets of their Sulong forms. The terrifyingly powerful transformation triggered under a full moon. One night, under a brilliant full moon, the Minks demonstrated their Sulong transformations. Luffy and his crew watched in awe as the Minks' eyes turned red, their fur turned pure white, and their power exploded to an almost uncontrollable level. Inuarashi explained this form, his voice echoing with a primal growl as his transformation took hold. He stated that this is the true power of a Mink, but it's also dangerous. The power brings out their beastly nature and would consume them if not properly honed and trained. Luffy's eyes lit up with excitement as he realized that it would be perfect training. The Minks hesitated at first, worried about harming their new allies, but Nekomamushi chuckled, his massive Sulong form towering over the crew. He told Luffy and the rest to bring it on if they could handle them. What followed was an intense series of sparring matches. Luffy used his advanced haki and gum-gum abilities to keep up with the ferocious speed and power of the Sulong Minks. Trafalgar Law used his room technique to strategically counter their attacks, while Kid relied on his raw power and magnetism to create makeshift weapons to fend them off. Rouge, too, went toe-to-toe with the Minks, and even Boa Hancock joined in, using her agility and haki-infused kicks to keep the Minks at bay. Despite their combined strength, the Sulong Minks pushed the crew to their limits. The sparring made for great training, and the crew spent quite a few months training with the Minks as they honed their abilities and grew stronger day by day. Among the Sulong warriors was Carrot, the spirited rabbit Mink, who fought with unmatched speed and agility. Unlike the others, Carrot's Sulong form was more controlled, and she quickly stood out as a formidable ally. During a sparring session, Luffy found himself impressed by her resilience and enthusiasm. He complimented her for being exceptionally strong as he dodged her electrified claws. The two bonded quite a bit during the sparring. After the training sessions, Carrot began spending more time with the crew, bonding with Bonnie over their shared love of food and sparring playfully with Luffy and Kid. Her curiosity about the outside world grew, and she expressed her desire to leave Zoo and see the adventures Luffy spoke of so passionately. One evening, as the crew sat around a campfire, Carrot approached Luffy. She asked him if she could join him and his crew on his journey, saying that she wanted to help him against Kaido and see more of the world. Luffy instantly accepted, and the crew gained a new member. The weeks on Zoo were transformative. Luffy refined his haki, incorporating his rubber abilities into more devastating attacks. Law mastered new ways to manipulate his room technique for larger scale battles. Kid developed his magnetism to create more versatile and destructive weapons. Boa trained her observation haki to anticipate opponents' moves more effectively. Urouge grew significantly stronger and could use haki with greater efficiency. Carrot practiced controlling her Sulong form, ensuring she wouldn't lose herself in battle. Even Bonnie became much stronger at using her age fruit. The training wasn't just physical, it deepened the bonds between the crew and the Mink tribe. Luffy's unshakable optimism and courage inspired the Minks, while the crew's willingness to train alongside them earned their respect. Not everything was going to be smooth sailing though, because on one fateful morning, Jack the Drought arrived. The man arrived with ill intent, but the Minks were not alone. As he tried to push around and intimidate a few villagers, Luffy was the first one to step in, followed by the rest of the crew. Jack's towering form loomed over Luffy as he assessed his new opponent. His disdainful sneer betrayed a moment of hesitation as he gripped his scythe tightly, prepared to crush whatever stood in his way. But Luffy moved first, his speed astonishing. In an instant, his staff, gleaming with armament haki, collided with Jack's scythe in a thunderous explosion that shook the battlefield. The impact forced Jack backward, his footing faltering under the unexpected power. His earlier arrogance gave way to shock as he realized this was no ordinary opponent. The mammoth pirate roared in frustration, his form expanding into a massive beast as he assumed his Zoan transformation. His colossal mammoth body cast a shadow across the land as he charged forward. Tusks aimed to destroy everything in his path, but Luffy remained unmoved, his observation haki reading the movements with ease. As the mammoth thundered toward him, Luffy sidestepped gracefully, his staff striking one of the massive tusks with precision. The sound of cracking ivory echoed through the forest, a testament to the power behind Luffy's blow. Undeterred, Jack launched a flurry of attacks, each one a testament to his overwhelming strength, yet none of his blows landed. Luffy moved like the wind, his reflexes and agility allowing him to evade or counter each strike with perfect timing. His staff became an extension of his will, its every movement purposeful and devastating. Jack's frustration grew as Luffy continued his relentless assault, each blow sapping the mammoth pirate's strength. With his energy waning and his mammoth form unable to overpower the young pirate, Jack reverted to his human form, panting and battered. His once overbearing presence now seemed diminished as he staggered under the weight of defeat. Luffy, undeterred and unwavering, channeled his full might into one final strike. His staff radiated with both armament and Conqueror's haki, the air around it crackling with energy. The blow connected with an earth-shattering force, launching Jack from the battlefield and sending him plummeting into the distant ocean. The battlefield fell silent for a moment as the dust settled, and then cheers erupted from the gathered Minks. Luffy turned toward them, his confident grin splitting his face as his shoulders relaxed. Nekomamushi and Inuarashi exchanged quiet glances, recognizing in Luffy the spirit of a legend reborn. When the day came to leave, the crew stood at the edge of Zunesha, looking out over the endless horizon. The Minks gathered to send them off, cheering and waving. Carrot stood at the ship's bow beside Luffy, her excitement palpable as she gazed ahead at the horizon. Luffy's straw hat cast a shadow over his determined expression as the crew prepared for the next chapter of their journey. Their arrival in Wano revealed a land broken under Kaido's iron rule, a landscape marred by desolation, its people starving, and its once thriving lands reduced to barrenness. The presence of Kaido's beast pirates hung like a dark cloud, a constant reminder of the Yonko's oppressive reign. Enraged by the suffering he witnessed, Luffy resolved to end the tyranny. The Straw Hats soon found an ally in Yamato, Kaido's defiant child, whose knowledge of Onigashima and its defenses proved invaluable in crafting their strategy. The assault on Kaido's stronghold erupted into chaos as the crew and their allies stormed Onigashima. The battlefield fractured into fierce individual clashes, each combatant pushing their limits. Law and Kid confronted King in a battle of strategy versus raw power, their room techniques and Kid's strength countering the aerial ferocity and fiery slashes of Kaido's right-hand man. The clash culminated in a decisive strike, Law severing King's wing as Kid clashed with his sword and sent the Lunarian crashing to the ground below. Meanwhile, Boa faced Queen, her elegant yet devastating fighting style dismantling the cyborg's barrage of lasers and gadgets. Utilizing her haki-infused strikes, she rendered parts of his mechanical frame to stone, defeating him with a final, shattering blow. Above it all, Luffy confronted Kaido atop Onigashima. The Yonko's immense dragon form dominated the battlefield, his sheer presence shaking the earth with each movement. Luffy's staff, glowing with the intensity of his advanced Conqueror's haki, clashed against Kaido's spiked Kanabo in a titanic struggle. As Kaido shifted between forms, unleashing increasingly devastating attacks, attacks, Luffy matched him blow for blow, his unyielding spirit fueling every strike. But a powerful hit from Kaido sent Luffy momentarily to the ground, his body sparking with unfamiliar energy. In that pivotal moment, Luffy felt a surge unlike any before, a transformation born of his indomitable will and unshakable determination. Luffy's laughter echoed across the battlefield as his body underwent an extraordinary transformation. His hair turned stark white, and his entire form radiated energy, becoming fluid and exaggerated as though reality itself bent to his will. Kaido, towering in his hybrid form, stared in disbelief as Luffy effortlessly began to turn the tide of the battle. The Yonko's powerful attacks, which once carved destruction into the land, now seemed almost futile as Luffy deflected them with playful ease. His staff shifted forms mid-battle, transforming into bizarre, cartoonish shapes that still delivered devastating strikes with immense force, each blow further driving Kaido into a defensive position. The fight had become a spectacle of chaos and ingenuity as Luffy manipulated the environment itself, using it as a weapon and shield. Rocks bounced back at Kaido with incredible speed. The air warped under Luffy's attacks, and the battlefield seemed to come alive, responding to the sheer joy and defiance, fueling his every move. This transformation wasn't merely a new ability. It was the embodiment of Luffy's unyielding spirit and boundless imagination. Yamato, who had been holding off several beast pirates alongside the samurai of Wano, saw the shift in momentum and rushed to Luffy's side. His own strength, fueled by the legacy of Odin, complemented Luffy's chaotic yet powerful attacks. He unleashed his haki-coated strikes with precision, and together, Luffy and Yamato became an unstoppable force. Their combined power overwhelmed Kaido, who struggled to keep up with their relentless assault. As the battle reached its climax, Luffy's staff morphed into a massive, hammer-like shape, glowing with the concentrated energy of his haki. With Yamato providing cover, deflecting Kaido's desperate counterattacks, Luffy leaped high into the air, his body twisting with the elasticity of his newfound form. He came crashing down with a force that split the sky, the staff striking Kaido's kanabo and shattering it into splinters. The blow sent Kaido hurtling into the ground below, the mighty Yonko collapsing unconscious amid the ruins of Onigashima. With Kaido's defeat, the beast pirates scattered, their morale shattered without their leader. The people of Wano emerged from hiding, their faces alight with hope for the first time in years. Celebrations erupted across the land as the Straw Hats, the Minks, and Wano's samurai stood victorious. Exhaustion lined the faces of the heroes, but their triumph was undeniable. The oppressive weight of Kaido's rule had been lifted, and Wano was free. As the crew and their allies gathered, Luffy, still marveling at the power of his Gear 5 transformation, turned to Yamato. He stood proudly with the strength he had shown in battle, a testament to his desire to honor Odin's legacy. Luffy grinned widely at him and asked Yamato if he would join the crew. He instantly agreed, deciding to continue the legacy of the Kozuki. With the bond forged in battle, Yamato became the newest member of the Straw Hats, a powerful ally for the journey ahead. After the celebration, Yamato shared Odin's journal with Luffy. The pages detailed Odin's adventures with Goldie, Roger, and the secrets of Laugh Tale, and so Luffy began reading it with enthusiasm. Make sure to subscribe for more One Piece videos!